What got you interested in the martial arts? What got you started?
Got me interested in martial arts. When we started. Okay. Well, this might sound funny to you, but this started a long time ago, decades ago. I'm not the youngest guy in the sport by a long shot. But it started probably in the summer of '72 or '73. I'm not 100% positive at that time, but watching a TV show. If you've seen called The Green Hornet, there was a person on there named Kato, who actually was Bruce Lee, as everybody would know as today. But at that time, it was so new, nobody really knew who he was and what it was about. And when I seen that happening, I seen him on TV, it shocked me to see what he could do with his body. Kicking and punching, spinning around, and being so in control of everything, and being able to handle somebody who was so much bigger than him, because it was TV, that it was so impressive to me. It was so impressive that I said, I have to find this. Because you got to remember, at that time, I was a young kid. I was maybe 14, 15 years old. And the only thing I ever seen on TV were Westerns. And my dad had control of the box. It wasn't even a remote control then. You went up and changed the channel. You got stuck with that Western, and that's what you were watching. And the only fight scenes you've seen were a guy getting punched in the face and then picking him back off the ground and punching him again. And so to me, that was just, when you seen this guy from the Green Hornet, it was like, wow, look what he can do. And so I said, I'm going to get myself involved with this, find out some more about this martial arts stuff. So I couldn't really find anything out until I started looking in the phone book and seeing there was a martial arts school. It was approximately about 3 miles from my house in another township of the city. So when I seen that, when I went up there one day, it was 3 miles from my house, so I had to walk there. My dad thought it was completely crazy that I want to get involved in something like this, because he wasn't going to support it. You want to do it, you got to spend your own money. So I just wanted to see how much it was. Well, at that time, it was $12 a month. It was very inexpensive, but it was expensive to me because it was my paperboy money. So I walked up there, I knocked on the door. It was upstairs of some kind of a hobby shop that was downstairs. I go up there and there's a guy that answers the door. He's a big guy. His name is Nick Safuto. I'll never forget the guy because he's a big guy, but he had like a voice like funny, like Mike Tyson. But he was the nicest. Don't get me wrong, this guy was the nicest guy. He's built like a bull at the time. To me, he was just a large gentleman. And I'm thinking, well, how's he going to do the stuff that this Kato guy did? I just didn't understand it. How could he do the same things? So I look in the class, and they're all sitting down on the ground. I'm thinking, well, maybe sooner or later they're going to get up and start kicking and doing that stuff too. And then he said a word like "hajime," and they all start rolling around with each other. And it was judo. And at that time, you can remember, I was very young. I didn't know the difference, had never explained it, and didn't know the difference between the karate and the judo. It was the judo stuff that they started. So I'm watching this class, and he said, would you like to try a class? And I was like, yeah, sure. He said, I guess I can come back. And he said, no, come on, you can try the class. At that time, there was no such thing as a release form or anything like that. You just want to try it? Come on and try it. So he lent me a uniform top. I went out and tried it with a guy. He put me with a guy. He was a black gentleman. His name was Art. And I'll never forget this guy. And he was so nice. And, they'd say, go, but at that time it was a word called hajime, which later I know what that means now, but at the time it didn't make sense to me. They'd say these words, I'd sit there and the guy would just attack me. So after a while you understand when he makes his command, you better go. And so I got used to that later, and when he said hajime, the guy, boom, he put me in a choke. Right? Immediately just put his hands around my neck and choked me out, and I had to tap this ground because I seen everybody else do it. First I wasn't even tapping, but I knew right away, I better stop this guy. And he put me back with him again. The gentleman said, just go when you're ready. I went again. Boom. Another split second. I'm thinking, oh my God, this guy's killing me, but in a nice way. He wasn't beating me up. He was just showing me how much he knew that I didn't know. So, I'm thinking, well, I'd never do anything done with this guy. He's just going to do this to me the whole time. He's pulled me off with this guy, hit me with a younger kid about my size. I don't even know if he had a colored belt on or anything. And he did the same thing. Go, and boom, the kid, started on my neck, but I knew I was strong enough to pull his hands off. I did. In the meantime, I'm pulling his hands off. All of a sudden, boom, my arm goes into a position, and I got to tap this mat again. From that moment on, I knew I was hooked to this. I had to do stuff like this, and I was going to do it for a long time. So I did it that whole summer. Winter came. I didn't have any transportation to get up there and back and forth, so I had to stop, and I did it the following summer again, too. And then he wound up growing so large that they moved to a place where I had no transportation to get to. And I know right around then I was 16 or 15 and a half, something like that. So it kind of faded away, and that's how my start became in an inside look at the judo and the grappling world. It was actually my first art I got involved in.
And how did you move into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, now you're talking a couple decades ago also, where I didn't get involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I started to get more involved into, I opened my own school. I probably opened my own school when I was around 39, 40 years old. And seeing that, I always was one of those guys from being involved in so many martial arts that I knew when I opened my own place, I wanted the best for people. So like anybody else, got to see, and I knew about the Gracies now before even the UFC started. I knew about Rickson Gracie and was reading books on stuff like that all the time and starting to understand about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it wasn't forefronted yet. And then when you seen they brought like the Royce Gracie into the UFC and all that, to me that was so interesting. It proved to everybody this was an art that had to be done, and it had to be done. I wanted to seek it out from my students. I've always wanted to give the students the best I could give them, and so for me to give them more, I had to train with a lot of people to get better with it. So when I seen this happening with the Gracies, I didn't go after and say, boy, I want to be able to get my style like Royce Gracie's. I wanted to find out who got him this way. How did he get this good? I wanted to know who was his instructors. And so I went around and found a couple gentlemen that I knew taught him. And none of them were in the States, but only a couple. So I actually traveled to a couple parts of the United States to train with these guys to see, well, maybe if he can teach him that, maybe he could teach me that, or I could pick up enough to give it back to my students. And so I went to a couple of different places. I don't want to name the guys because they're just, the attitudes weren't like mine. I didn't feel that they had the same philosophies that I wanted to instill in my students until I met Pedro Sauer. I flew out to Utah and met him and seen the way he conducted a class, and right there I knew a relationship was going to be born. I wanted to be around this guy, I wanted to train more with this guy, I wanted to try to find a way to get out there more and do all this stuff, and that's how I came across it. When I seen the way he could teach and knew that he was part of the Royce Gracie teaching, I knew that this is how this guy became so good. And he was such a nice person, and that's how my relationship started in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
And how long have you been training under Pedro Sauer?
I've been training under Pedro Sauer now for approximately 10 years. Recently received my black belt. This was not an easy road by any means, just because, I mean, I had to go out there and I had to keep my skills up. I had to make sure that I spent my time 25 hours a year with a black belt and train with them, and that would have been a minimum. I did at least double that, just to keep my rank, keep it honest, and earn it the right way. Obviously I've trained, competed in some tournaments that actually helped me progress into my black belt, but that's how I got that.
So since you've worked in a bunch of different martial arts and trained under a lot of different guys, your teaching philosophy is kind of a mix of
my teaching philosophy is a lot like what you would say with Pedro Sauer. More so, I'm very laid back on the mat. I'm smiling every class. I love being out there training that.
How about your goals as a martial artist? Are you still trying to learn as much as you can?
Always learning. The goals as a martial artist, never become complacent. Because somebody will run right over you. A new school will pop up and you're not going to be able to hang it because they got too much new stuff. My instructors, again, have their own style. I train constantly. I go away still. Just because I got my black belt doesn't mean I stop and I'm the greatest there's going to be. I can still learn. I will go out and just train with other people. I've trained with a lot of high-level black belts, and I bring them in for seminars. I want my school to continue learning. I don't want to become complacent. That's a good way, to have your school constantly grow. I want to always have my academy in first place. Always. I want to be able to keep that. That's a good relationship to have out there with people. Just to keep your stuff growing. Never become complacent. Don't take anything for granted. Somebody will take over.
You mentioned keeping your academy in first place. Is that competition first place? I mean, how important is competition?
My academy's in first place, not because of competition. My academy's in first place because of my instructors and my students. They help each other all the time. And I don't want to brag about the competitions, but this school is in the local area undefeated for 10 years. No one's even come close to getting us.